fetal integration is a bitch. We don't look forward to it when we realize it's going to happen. We're sitting there on a cloud dangling on our legs thinking, got to jump in a minute. Oh, did I choose them? What? England? Oh, come on, I've been there too many times. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go somewhere warm. You know? And anyway, he doesn't love her. And he'll hate me when I get there. I know he will. And anyway, the people in Hartlepool, they once caught a monkey on the beach washed up from a boat. They thought it was a French spy and they hung it. Yes, people, it's true. I was born under the symbol of the White Rose, the symbol of the Guardian Alliance, Yorkshire, England. I also plan to come in on December 21st. Any significance? No, not really. Before very long, I couldn't stop my parents from moving to a place called Hartlepool that once captured a monkey, thought it was a French spy, and hung it on the beach. You mean I was that bad? No. Anyway. So anyhow, one does what one does when one's little and disillusioned and really, what do I do when I'm here? And like all of us as children, I found ways to entertain myself. Because by and large, we all, as indigos, and I haven't met one yet, that didn't have a complicated childhood. Why do indigos need to experience unconditional love in order to find the strength to spend the next 40 years trying to live the opposite way around? But we do. We did. And it's an interesting exercise. Anyway, in my case, I got into my sand pit because we lived close to the beach in the north of England. Even the sand was cold. And I lived in this funny place that hung monkeys thinking they were spies, and that's an indication of the kind of people I was living amongst. So when they discovered that I talked to people you couldn't see, all right, and I lived in a part of the country that not only hung monkeys, but they were terribly superstitious, and they hated anything that was witchy or weird, right? So I was the kid on the block that no one was allowed to play with. Well, part of me figured that it gave me more time to be with the Eiyani, but I must admit that the effect built up, and I felt like some kind of, lesser being, and it was complicated. And by the time I was 7, I tried to leave the body desperately hard, didn't quite make it, and had to stay. So having had to stay, I figured, well, all right, if that's the way it has to be, I'll do this, I'll change this. So I now know, truly, that I used my powers, which I'd been using before that, but hadn't really realized I was. But I forced my father to win the lottery, as you would call it. Right? I did. Not too much, but just enough. So anyway, I fixed the problem of where I came in to be and all the people that were being so bad and freaking me out all the time. So I made the family move south, and that was a little bit warmer. And anyway, life went on and things like that, and the whole situation with the life track was wrong for me too, so I had to make myself do the whatever you call it in America, but I had to get to we have a different system, snob system, where you have to go into grammar school, right? So anyway, I made myself get the exam even though I was made to fail, and my mother threw a plate of food at me because I failed, and then lo and behold, I told everybody I was going to do it, and a month later somebody dropped out and I got in. I did this magic frequently afterwards, but what I'm telling you is about you, right? Because if you can open some of your memory, you will also get access to the times in your lives in which you're performing magic, manifesting things, and being awfully powerful. But these things we've been talking about, these aparty things, these DNA mutations, which is the same as a party, right? These code reversals is the same as a party and the other thing. All of these things are part of a big game, right, to render us feeling powerless. And part of the powerlessness is that from the time they actually enter the physical body, there are all manner of effects that we experience individually that have us forget the power that we're connected with when we're children. And by the time we become adult, it's become an ambition rather than a part of our living reality. Okay? I don't like talking about myself in public or even in private very much. But I'll just add to that having done those things a couple of times, then I got, no, 4-letter words, right. I got, I got taken out temporarily by a DRAC teacher that freaked me out so badly that I didn't recover, and I went out and discovered the freedom of being a decent soccer player, and I escaped into the realms of fantasy and the elements, because I discovered that I had gifts. I could see and read the wind. You know, I could anticipate and do certain things that would give you, you know, like miles, and that kind of helped a lot. And I went and played with myself in that sort of way for a while, and then I had to get serious about life again and create the foundational platform I was supposed to have for later on. So then I had to make myself go from a blue-collar situation with no qualifications to get into a university place. And I performed magic in creating that situation for myself and did that. And I must have overshot it, because I actually finished up getting a scholarship to a business school, which I hadn't planned to do. Right? And then I came back to be amongst the Illuminati and the Freemason people. Wow. Right, at close quarters. You know, I affectionately think of them as the chinless wonders. That's what we call them in England. You know, or like the barber's cat. They're all thing and wind, you know. And at close quarters, the opposition were really quite frightening to me, coming from the sort of place they come from. And it was so traumatic again that I just wobbled and just quit, like I was a university dropout style person, but with a, you know, suit and a company car and all that thing, and I couldn't handle it. Anyway, this kind of thing went on for a long time. I didn't realize it was going down. And during the course of it, though, the spiritual part started to bring in information more consciously about symbolic language, or the law of symbols it's sometimes called. And the American way of talking about that is waking dreams, which I think is unfortunate, because it actually tends to obscure what's going on. And from the time that I was 30, I became acutely aware of this, and I realized that Spirit was communicating with me in a form, being rather sort of, given where I was coming from, very single-minded, sort of very self-made, determined, very alone kind of person, right? And what Spirit was doing was giving me information in a way that I couldn't possibly call it anything else. And it slowly started to open my memory, just the process of allowing that to be my reality. And it started to allow me to see into my life and to be aware of the fact that the beneficial outcomes that occurred were by my own hand. All right? Now, the platform for the conversation about contact and why and how and all the rest of it is really based on the law of thought, the principle of creation, okay? That's where I'm coming from on this. And the concept of witness, which is an expression that came out of, I don't know where exactly, whether it was Maha or Ash and I were talking sometime, and we wanted to have an expression for the process that a person experiences in coming into alignment with the divine blueprint, and doing that consciously, so that we wanted it to have an expression that determined the conscious relationship with what we call DNA activation, because me particularly, but both of us share a notion that people have almost a remote relationship, in a way, with the techniques. Remote, why? Well, because DNA activation is where we feel that the relationship almost begins and ends, right? And there's a whole component in here that isn't being talked about, and that's really what this is about, although I won't use that word very often. What we're talking about is actualizing, or another way of talking about is bringing yourself into Christ consciousness by acting, thinking, and behaving in certain ways, all right? So hence the development of the quiz and the ways of getting a little insight on the shadow and the way it's playing through your life and taking it into the energetic level of Ire Mani Amanu. Now, those of you that are familiar with Angelic Realities, which was a class that Shanna gave in Wyoming in 2000, is where the first protocol for contact was ever given, as such. And those of you that read it are quite aware that in there a point is made, a point is offered, I should say, in which it said quite clearly, it's 50% guardian, 50% you. They'll meet you halfway, right? Now, let's look at it this way. The guardians, for their 50, together with all the other things they do that don't necessarily concern you personally, because they do a lot of things, but let's say their 50% is providing you with the techniques. Do you think that doing them is your 50? There you go. Well, you're wrong. Excuse me, you're mistaken. In my opinion, doing the techniques would amount to about 10% of your 50, leaving 40% of your 50. And what would that be about? Do you understand what actualization means as opposed to activation? Yeah? What do you think? Look. Exactly. I mean, embodying consciously. Right. Now the techniques, think of it as push and pull. Right? Let's suppose the techniques will push you along. And they definitely will. Right? But you want to get to a destination. And every time we look at the subject, it seems as if we've got less real linear time to do that. All right? Whether or not the Guardians are talking about 50-50 effort, it strikes me that if anything's so attractive, wonderful, important, why waste time getting there? Yeah? But then, since we're talking about shadow, we're talking about the realms of prevarication. There's always a reason to adopt your disciplines tomorrow. Because today, you got a headache. Today, somebody's been in your face. Today, somebody at work has been bad at you. Today, you had a bank or a credit card statement. There's always a reason that will engage your attention. Right? Now, if ever I've encountered, and I said to you in the beginning, I told you some of my story, right? I haven't told you the warts and all story. But I'm speaking from personal experience when I'm telling you that I know what it is to live with shadow, and I know what it is to overcome it, and I know what it means to find it in yourself to say nothing matters more than this to me. All right? I'll go back to my story and I'll come back to my sort of script outline in a minute. This ramp that I created for myself eventually led to a place where I employed 30 people, lived in a house big enough to accommodate 30 people, 3 amazing children, right? And a wake-up call that's running right through the middle of it, right? To an extent where I have to hire a stenographer-type person because I'm channeling information in business meetings. I can't remember a word I've said seconds after I said it. And people are asking, saying, oh, that was Michael, where did you get that from? That was amazing. That's going to save us millions in research, blah, 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 blah. I think, what did I say? Oh, where'd that come from, right? And as things progressed, there was a stage where I was doing healing work. I was owned my own company with other directors, and I thought, this is heaven. Half of my time I'm teaching healing and practicing. The other half of the time I'm being whatever I'm being with these other guys. And there's a good business, good spiritual principles, working with nice people and nice companies. I'm in heaven. Hello. Wrong. And one day I was driving to the office, and my first oral communication occurred, in which I remember I was asked a question. What if it means you must leave your children? And the question came in a way where the answer, yes, left my mouth before I realized what had happened. And another time I was asked a question much later on, by which time I had given everything I had away. I'd given it all to my former wife and children. And having done that, I was asked a check question. And it was, you ready to walk the talk? You ready to walk the talk with no money in your pocket, no clothes in your bag? And I got a picture of Dick Whitting, you know, me and the stick and the red and white hanky, you know. And I said, you mean like living under trees? If necessary, yes. Will you do that? What if it rains? Well, think of rain differently. I can do that. And anyway, I like trees. Well, all right. Okay, 2 weeks later, I was given a place to live. I was given a job, all the freedom I needed to do my spiritual whatever it was. Okay? In that same span of time, I accidentally typed something in on the keyboard. Having done a work with a group that weekend to check some information, I fluked a contact with somebody else's website, and I saw 2 paragraphs from a book called Voyages. And I found myself within the following months in a position where the possibilities of promoting the work in England opened up in front of me. I had all the support I could have ever wished for, coming from zero, -0, right? Now, I'm doing this really because I want, as I said in the beginning, I want you all to realize, since there's no difference between you and me, except your story is a little different, that's all. But the actual content is the same. You've all had magic running through your lives. You've all had expressions of your personal power running through your lives, right? And we come to things like, okay, let's just go the extra mile now. All we have to do is to look at ways of bringing all of that into your living reality. Okay? Allow yourself to remember how magical you've been, because you've been programmed to forget it. If that wasn't the case, you wouldn't have issues of powerlessness, fear of death, judgment, victimizer games. There wouldn't be people who came to workshops, the best information on the planet. There wouldn't be regents, and here's a bit that isn't going to go down very well in some quarters, there wouldn't be regents who seem not to have heard of Christ consciousness or what it actually means in terms of personal behavior. I've had people speak to me, address me in a way that reflects such a lack of understanding when my behavior personally and or Ashana's together with mine was as loving, as considerate and as sensitive as you could ever wish for. And because we wouldn't agree with them, because we would facilitate the understanding of a group of people who came to us for advice, we were vilified and called names by someone who would stand in the room and call me all manner of names to hear me referring to a behavior like it. I watch things periodically between the E-group. I hear people talking to each other about getting it, who's getting it, what's getting it, who's getting what. The behavior is at times appalling. As far from anything an Eiyani would want to spend an afternoon cup of tea with than I've ever met. And the message here is very clear. The Eiyani don't need people who are walking around with an ego stuck on a 30-foot stick, who've got an inflated sense of what they know and an inflated sense of what they think they can do because they don't have a bloody clue. They don't know yet. You don't remember yet. You wander around with 50, 60, 70, 80,000 thoughts a day and you don't know what most of them are. And yet you know that you create all the time. Because you know that energy and thought is the same thing. And you know that out of those things it creates stuff. Well, how much do you care? How much do any of those people care? Because, to be truthful, I'm just talking about what I observe. And I'm observing people who are paying lip service to the very core of creation, the very principles on which we build things. Everything is built from that. Everything is built in that way. And we want to go and play with people that currently have the ability to create stars and planets if they choose. We are still, by virtue of what? What we did to ourselves or what they did to ourselves. A combination of both, as a matter of fact. But we are still, unless we get with what 50-50 means, and we don't understand it and we don't do something about it, I'm sorry, but the bad news is we are a cosmic virus on the cosmic internet. And people don't want us in their inbox, the state that we're in a lot of the time. All right. That's the hard part. That's the bit that I was worried about talking about. But I'm sorry, guys. I have a responsibility to speak the truth as much as Ashana does. And I've got to call it the way I see it. I included myself at the beginning, so I'm not sparing me either, because I'm not ready yet. I'm not the finished article. And neither does Ashana think so either. You guys think we know it all. We've got it all sorted out. I've told you a little bit about my tale, the fun bits, the magical bits. But we taught ourselves. All right? We both came to a point where, consciously and unconsciously, by varying degrees, both of us discovered things that nowadays, with the information we have, the insights we have, not to mention the techniques that we have, we taught these things to ourselves in a curious kind of way. And what's awfully interesting is that we both came to the same point of self-leadership. And that's to do with the business about the 50-50 thing. That's to do with recognizing that unless we changed it, nobody else is gonna. It's nobody else's business anyway. But anything less is an expression of the externalized God syndrome. That's to do with our overlays. We all have them because we've all slept with the enemy for very, very good reasons down through the ages and the times. The strategic requirements of maintaining purity in the gene lines was so profound and important that we understood it so well that we would do anything to serve the cause. We haven't been bad people, we've been very good people, but we've paid a price sometimes with our own our own DNA reversals. We knew that, we felt we could handle it, and by the time we came to where we are now, that we would have the strength, the resolve, the insight, the understanding, the wisdom and awareness to actually get ourselves through it. That's why we didn't want to come into a body anyway, because we understood it all then, and we realized just exactly what we'd had to do. In those times, in those periods of times, the density that's increased on this planet is multiplied so many times over, it's just appalling, and it's so difficult. But we actually took the chance. The odds, the outcomes, the requirements, the objectives, the things we cared about, the things we fought for in those ways, because there are different kinds of fighting. The ladies did a wonderful job for us in many respects in that sense. You know, they had to look at the situation and think, my goodness, when time comes to take myself down through there and get out again, it's going to be real tough. All right? This is a different take on the information Shanna was sharing this afternoon. But really, what I'm really trying to say to you is that you came in here knowing you had what it takes. Do you not realize that you're each embodied as the strongest member of your soul family? You're in the body you're in because you're the best man or woman for the job. Because you got what it takes. You got 1,727 other selves are looking at you. The ones that you say are in the past and those vectors that belong in history are reaching forward like fun, wanting to connect with you and help you. Do you think they're not Eiyani? Many of them are. Some of them aren't. Some you didn't want to take tea with, but you've got to deal with it, you know. There are those in the future that are actually you. The Eiyani you want to have contact with are yourselves talking to you. That's who you're asking to talk to, yourself. The next future life you're going to live. All right? It's all you. And you sit there at the center of it all, not yet fully aware of the power that is yours. You can change anything, really. But the issues that we face are the things that we have to confront, the deals that we have to deal with, the circumstances that we have to find a way of being with. Now, Shanna, as you all know, brought up 3 children virtually single-handedly. I mean, she worked her butt off. And she found time in that situation of a single-handed, low-wage parent, minimum-wage parent, feeding kids, and finding time, not just to do technique to the extent that we're asked to, but to go well beyond the call of that because she understood and appreciated the importance of it without understanding what she was here to do. But she related to it. She didn't be sold the job. She understood. In my own way, I took myself through similar situations without knowing why. Never able to explain to 3 glorious children what had happened to their dad. And in that experience, guys, I started to understand what love felt like, because it was the only tool I had to work with. The only thing I could do was to love them to bits, like I'd never done before. And as I did that, I taught myself what it meant to feel love for the first time, and I hadn't for a long time. And as I did that, it opened doors in my head. It opened doors all over the place. It seemed as if what little magic I could recall from childhood just seemed to multiply. You know, wherever my intention was applied to an outcome that was beyond any concern I had for myself, but only for others. All I had to do was to notice that there was a sincere leading component. That was desire, really, to be of practical value. Not to be in service to some nebulous thing, but to feel right here that there was something I needed to do. And you just project that, and it would be there. Really? And I'm talking about a period of time that followed a number of years in which the law of symbols and all the symbology and the rest of it, I got quite used to living my life that way. Now I can look back at it and I can see how as Shanna brought herself on, she used sound a lot more. Very Eiyani person. And Eiyani's hypersensitive to sound tone. Whereas nowadays I realize that then, I'm talking about her then because she's not heavily Eiyani biased now. I mean, she's in balance. I was heavily Mane then. And that meant I was visually oriented, as we now all know. But we didn't know that then. So that I should have this relationship with symbolic language is not surprising. Anything oral wouldn't make any difference to me. But the visual aspect was really real, and I worked with it and developed an understanding that way, and provided support for myself, just as she had done, working with sound. Now, the self-test that you guys done, I did, I think, in 96, and then again in 99. And by applying the simple principles that I'm talking about leading yourself, being in partnership with self, right? Being in agreeable partnership, and something I haven't got to yet called the mentor, not in the Kathara sense of mentor, but in another way. That without technique, we brought ourselves to the place where we were able to deepen our involvement in the work, to expand it, and to reach a point where both the conscious relationship with our 3D waking selves shifted hugely into a very quiet but highly empowered form. And with that, the relationship with Eiyani and the nature and quality of contact shifted greatly too. All right? Now, I'll try and get back into this, because I'm sorry, I hope I've made sense to you so far. Because there's been such a, please. There's been such a bubble of stuff in here that I just didn't know how it was going to come out at all, and I just let it go. Now, picking up on the outline, when I started to realize that something else was going on, the transition from this kind of relationship with spirit through symbol came right up to a point where by this time I was unemployable. I was like the guy in Encounters of a Third Kind, the one who was making the... Yeah? I mean, really, I'm not exaggerating. I mean, my life was like I was absolutely just freaked out with just deepening my awareness of published material, and I know now why. I needed to see what was there, I needed to understand what was there, I needed to be aware of certain of the twists and turns in it all. And also to spend time in so-called one of the leading spiritual centers in England, which was a kind of a haven for me at the time when all my business friends, family, everyone else was telling me I'd gone crazy. I'd just go there and hide. But that also gave me an opportunity to actually observe the spiritual fraternity of England, coming and going, and the games they played and all the other things they did. Tremendously instrumental. Anyway, an old clairvoyant sort of gypsy lady that I'd used in previous years, hadn't seen her for years, and every time I went to the store, the Publix equivalent, in a span of time, 3 weeks, every time I went there, she was there with her husband in his wheelchair. And first of all, it was just highs and how are you, and then I went another time in the same week, and there she was, and this is strange, and yeah, right, and I'm going, okay, what does this mean? Because I was living my life from the point of view then that everyone I met had a message for me, right? Everyone had information to give me. And by the time we got to the third week, she's saying, well, Spirit's telling me about this workshop you're going to do. What workshop am I going to do? What? Well, you're going to do a workshop, right? I said, well, I've been thinking about it. She said, well, when are you going to do it? I'm not going to do it. She said, you are? She said, you are. My guides told me you're going to. Nah, your guide's wrong. Anyway, the last time I saw her, I went home. I went home with her shopping, right? And I hadn't been in the house more than a few minutes, and the phone rang. She said, anyway, what's it going to be called? I said, what? She said, come on, what's it going to be called? Oh, I don't know. She said, what do you want to talk about? What do you know? Spiritual stuff. Yeah, that stuff. Prana and well, prana, really. So I said, come on. She said, you've got loads of ideas. She said, if you were going to give a workshop, what would you call it? What would it be about? I said, I don't know. Soul food. Oh, she said, wow, that's a great name. And I'm still talking to her. I didn't realize she put the telephone down. So I thought, oh, God, what have you done now? Anyway, I went to carry on doing what I was doing. And the phone rang again. And she said, it's me. What date is it going to be? Well, next year. No, she said, come on, when's it going to be? I don't really know. I've not got anything ready. I don't want to say to anybody. She said, well, you're going to have to do it. She said, loads of people. I know loads of people want to come. Well, they pay me £10, $15. You think they pay £10 to come? I had no money. She said, they pay more than that. Pay more than that. No, I said, that's all right, that's all right. Well, then, what would I have to do? Do I have to give them little books and things? Yeah, you're going to do that. And what about lunches and things like that? Yeah, well, they like it. We don't. Okay, fine. All right, what about Easter weekend? Right, done, boom. What do you mean, born free? Yeah? So anyway, the purpose of this is to introduce the first bit of, to get serious a minute, is anyway, so I kind of cobbled together the best combination of anything that I even would identify with, which wasn't an awful lot, but it was enough to spend a day with a couple of dozen people. And anyway, in the morning, I had my first encounter, like really, with the person I now know as Maha, Tue, Uete. And it was 4:45 in the morning, and it was, Michael, out of bed now. What? Are my children out of bed already? Hello? Desk. What? Downstairs. Desk. Okay. So, 5 o'clock, cup of tea steaming away, a dozen cigarettes in my hand. I'm sitting there going, okay. Okay. Oh, right. Okay. Okay. Come on. They're coming at 10. Anyway, at 8:45, energy follows thought is the law of creation. Therefore, energy is conscious thought. All energy is vibration. Vibration is form, sound, and color. Therefore, conscious thought is vibration, color, sound, and form. The purest expression of vibration is light. Therefore, light is consciousness, and consciousness is light. That was my first transmission. Now, I don't remember anybody writing any stuff like that then, and that formed the basis of my progression afterwards. And I now know that the Shannas took on a very similar, almost parallel direction as we were made more and more aware of the importance of developing not just what we call conscious self-management within ourselves, but to begin to remember what energy and expression of energy is. And this really is just another way of talking about love. So we take it today into all energy is conscious, all consciousness is energy, and thought intention is the essential expression of consciousness as energy. What I've been talking to you about, sometimes in an amusing way, but the thread throughout what I've been talking to you is this. I've been trying to loosen you up a little bit and start to hopefully trigger a few thoughts that thought intention is the essential expression of consciousness energy. Now, that is you and Source at one. When you understand and feel it, you're on your way home. The first step in witness, the first few degrees of what we're referring to as witness, the road to oneness, when you're really making a connection with a sense of yourself. And the sense of yourself will presuppose certain personal characteristics, or what we call shadow, are addressed and dispatched with love. Okay? Therefore, thought is the keystone of all creation and the organic essence of being, divine blueprint, in other words. If at one moment is co-resonance of thought intention, then evolution is a direct function of alignment with divine blueprint, expressed as consistent thought intention as action. That is the formula for self-direction leadership. The process of actualization consistency, this business about consistency. You see, when I distinguish between activation and actualization, the difference is activation will give you a nanosecond of frequency, of relationship with frequency of primal life force currents. Unless you're a highly evolved being, you can't do an awful lot with a nanosecond of primal life force currents, but you can certainly blow some party out of your shields, which is the very slow road, right? What you want to do is to have a more consistent and stable relationship with increasingly high levels of frequency, or a greater volume or amounts of primal life force current. And this is the key, consistent. Right? Actualization is the development of consistent relationship with parts of yourself through DNA activation granted, through dedication to techniques. But if you pull a plug out that was called a party, which is a receiver for chaotic frequency, you pull a plug out and you don't consciously do something in shifting your present moment awareness in the way that you manage your thinking and feeling processes more consciously, you won't take advantage of removing the plug that you want to get rid of. Right? And there are 20,736 plugs, of which 14,500, roughly speaking, are pulling chaotic frequency. And the idea of balance, funnily enough, if you, just as an aside, if you look at the shift from third strand DNA levels up to 4 1/4, 4.5, and you do the math on that, that's where the sense of balance comes, because you will have got to a point where you're balancing your positive and negative party receivers as a minimum. That's what balance, in my opinion, really means to getting that job done. All right. So, coming back to the Conttact context, having tried to clarify a little bit the relationship between thought, intention, action as the principle of creation, and therefore the major house rule that Source follows in all its business. This is a quote from the Seth material. And this is a part of Jane Roberts when she's channeling her higher self. We've checked it out with the GA. And it says this: the human race is a stage through which various forms of consciousness travel before you can be allowed. Before you can be allowed. Somebody's into judgment, huh? Think about that. I mean, I'm not going to knock people who publish books that talk about certain principles. I mean, paradigms that I care about are those that you've been carrying around for 250 billion years, not the ones people have written in the last 5. Can be allowed, reflect on that. Because you're not, by definition, welcome in the state that we're in. I've already told you that about being the cosmic virus. Not be allowed into systems of reality that are more extensive and open. You must first learn to handle energy and see through physical materialization the concrete result of thought and emotion. Now, this is talking about responsibility in a much more constructive and interesting way, which is wholly aligned with the freedom teachings. It's not wagging a finger and saying, you've got to take some kind of form, some relationship, some idea that you're responsible for things that don't seem very real to you. But you have a broad sense of history, you have some sense of the events that occurred in all of that. But how do you see yourself in relation to it as an individual, right here, right now, steering your own boat through this path towards contact, through this path to being a member of an evacuation team? How is it meaningful to you? This is beginning to help you understand what the requirements concern. And I've already said it to you once, and I'll probably say it a couple more times before I've finished. But schooling yourself in terms of conscious management of mind, thought, energy is what you're being asked to look at. We express it in one sense in releasing shadow, but there's a positive component, because there's much more that can be accomplished with the energy that you generate that is raw potential. If you think about Source from a certain perspective, what Source has done is taken its own raw potential and manifest structures to experience itself through the beings it creates, okay? The beings that are created, that are sentient and capable of intelligence, need to be aware that they are walking bundles of potential, given whatever form, whether they're bipedal or not, right? But they are capsules of potential. When they recognize themselves, when they become conscious and they form that relationship with what they are, and the fact that they're already, in the case of the angelic human, they are perpetual manifestation machines. That's cropped up, not full frontally, but at other angles during the course of this gathering already. All right? There are people here who have brought materials to our attention. Paddy is very strong in the way that people can demonstrate the power of thought by working with water. Water is a highly impressionable substance, highly programmable. All right? There's excellent work that she's more familiar than I do, although I know about the book, where the photographs demonstrate the power of thought intention in relation to water and its structure. There's an upside and a downside to it. Monica brought examples of someone else's thought intention to our attention, and that concerned ice cubes growing in a freezer where there's an icicle growing upwards. Okay, the first take from the GA was immediately, they are transmitters, and they are linked to the Wasadak game. They're an example of photosonic transmission, and they're a demonstration of how, for example, the frequencies that they want to imbue in your personal shields would be expressed. In other words, the proportion of the human body. Sid, how much is it? How much water are we? 90 what? Okay. Well, the sharp-eyed chap in Canada noticed and offered a demonstration of the way in which photosonics actually affect the structure of the water in your body, right? And the certain sure way, and it's something fun enough that Ash and I have played with on a number of occasions in the past about the ways that they would attempt to get into the fields. And water has always been a major point of interest for us. And those examples demonstrate what can be done with frequency and water as a vehicle for it. You know, its consciousness can be altered much more readily. And since we are substantially water, it's showing you, on the one hand, a negative expression. On the other hand, the work that I know that Patty tends to use as a preliminary to some of her classes is to try and impress on people the power of thought, intention, and action. All right? Anyway, as a child forms mud pies from dirt, so our civilizations formed out of the thoughts and emotions. In more advanced systems, thoughts and emotions are immediately translated into action, into whatever approximation of matter there exists. All right? The lessons must be taught and learned well. The responsibility for creation, and this isn't talking source, it's talking you, must be clearly understood. To some extent, humans exist in a soundproof and isolated room. Hate and fear create destruction in that room, and until the lessons are learned, destruction follows destruction. That was used with the GA's blessing because it makes a point in a particular way. Now, I'm cycling back towards the kind of formality of things, and I'll try and get into what it means to be an inner earth and what some of the experiences are and how it feels to communicate with them. This is stuff that came out last night, and I'll try and get as much of it back as I can. All right. People who are familiar with the Kathara materials, how many people here are familiar with the Kathara material? A lot of you. Okay, good. Well, I won't spend very much time dealing with this. Just to remind you then, right, a party exists in the shields in a naturally occurring organic way, right? The 20,736 points are, if you like, the plugs that connect us, or did in our original pure form, connect us with primal life force currents through our personal shields. That is where reverse DNA or code mutations or the entry point for chaotic frequencies comes in to the shields, all right, the party. Now, the way it works through us is that it takes us from the living awareness of dimensionalization and the necessary requirements for compartmentalization as forms of experience, is that the overburgeoning chaotic frequencies flowing through the grids into our shields and being picked up by the party means that a common element of the human experience is to label things. Now, behind the tendency to label, and we would probably all agree that a kind of annoying thing that we all do is to label stuff. Because, well, if we're in a hurry and we can't have a long conversation, then we'll use shorthand and label something in order to try and communicate some meaning. Rarely satisfactorily, but there are good reasons sometimes why we don't. But, you see, what's really happening is that the kind of thought function available, or the brain capacity available, to process those frequencies goes where the frequencies take it. And the frequencies themselves encourage this tendency to label and mini-compartmentalize as a means to experience and to know. And of course it isn't a means to experience and know, because whilst ever you label anything, you never know it. Right? So there is a tip coming up here, which is that try and adopt a game with yourself and try and remember to think the opposite of what you think is real just for a week and see what you get. Because it will just throw up a lot of interesting information about the way that your brain is doing stuff that you weren't aware of, right? And looking at how often you label something as a means to know it and a means to communicate it is a good one. If you can get your brain, if you can get, the mentor part that I haven't talked about yet, if you can get the mentor aspect to keep an eye on what your brain's doing, and the deal is that you give permission to the mentor to remind you each time it does it, and you open a little conduit where it'll just ping a little alarm into you and go, oh, did I do that? What did I do exactly? Did I do that again? All right? This is a technique I'll talk about a bit later on. But it's one that Shana was introduced to, and so was I. All right? And it's not the mentor that we talk about in Kathara. It's a different relationship with the higher parts. So this tendency for brain function to generate labels generally limits the human senses, okay? And brings you to the point of appreciating that you're dealing with programs, that you are anyway a program. And there's a whole series of frequency blocks, right, that prevent primal life force currents flowing, cut you off from source, generate and support the victim-victimizer game, the blame game, the judgment game, all that stuff, all of which is contractive in its essence. It's contracting, it's not expanding, right? Now, anything that contracts from the frequency level is dissonant, right? In other words, it's of reducing order. So on the basis of frequency accretion, you attract more chaotic patterns of frequency to you, which by definition means you push yourself further away from source, right? Which means that you're actually effectively, through the process of millions of years, you're actually pulling more a party into your personal shields without knowing it. That is our history up to this point in these terms. All right? So the frequency that you're receiving, the chaotic frequency you're receiving, which is now predominant, roughly 60% of what you're pulling in, so sometimes 70%, determines your relationship to everything. Because the frequency that you pull into your fields that is available for your entire biospiritual system to process will guarantee that you have certain kinds of relationships with the external environment. The frequency is providing you with that way of perceiving your environment, the hologram. It's guaranteeing that you will react in certain ways. It's guaranteeing that you're some kind of puppet or marionette, right? Somebody comes along just walking through the boat and goes, you go, huh, do that to me. I'll give you one, you know what I mean? But I mean, it will provoke a reaction immediately, right? It will happen. You see? Your system will react before you've even had time to engage anything. Because you'll feel as if you've been violated in some way, that people have actually crossed a boundary that they're not entitled to, right? Which I agree, it's not very pleasant. But what I'm really saying is that you'll find that your entire system will have perpetrated a reaction in milliseconds, right? Now that's often sort of obscured a bit by the midbrain conversations, the paleomammalian part of you, the one that runs the chemical hormonal structure in the central nervous system and all that palaver that gives you the fight or flight stuff, right? That's all connected utterly and completely into all of this. So that millisecond reaction you have when someone violates you in some nominal way, just think how fast that is processed through to reaction, all right? Now, what I'm telling you is, and I'm telling you it from the standpoint of two people's experience who have been prone entirely and are still to some extent prone to the same chemical, the same energetic frequency chemical interrelationship. I'm telling you that you can change it. I know that we can change it. And I'm not selling you positive thinking. I'm selling you self-awareness. That's all. The desire to manage, to come into conscious relationship with the parts of yourself that we call shadow, right, that are inclined to be anything. From aggressive because someone bumps you on a day when you're feeling miserable already, to feeling deeply hurt because your lover's had a bit of bad news and you're not going to get it together tonight. Or anything else that suggests that you're less than okay. That you're less than the wonderful, right on, powerful, nothing to worry about deep down in their kind of being. But everything that you pull into your reality is designed to make you feel less than that. And all you got to do is, and you can get rid of 50% of what is causing you anxiety, stress, reasons not to do your techniques, not to feel happy, not to have a calm, relaxed, positive frame of mind when you're trying to get a contact going, first thing or late thing in the day, with your companion. When you can't get rid of all the crud and the rubbish that flies through your brain, you can't concentrate, you can't receive anything, because it just won't sit still. It's all the same stuff, and it's all coming out of the apathy receivers. And the chaotic frequency that has been transmitted through the galactic grids into the planetary grids and ultimately through to you right? That you can use techniques to get you part of the way. But if you want to go fast track, start to pay attention to the fact there's a huge amount you can do. And when you take that part seriously, and you're seen by your companion and your Eiyani, right? Saying, I want to fire on all of my 60 cylinders, pal, not 20. Right? They go, right. That person's pushing it. And so will we. Because you take up your contribution to 110%, and so will they. You take your contribution to 250, and so will they. If you call 25% of your potential normal effort your 100%, that's what you'll get. And your progress will be slow. Very slow. Maybe too slow. Okay. The karma and miasms are fundamentally the same thing. Molecular compaction is another word you've heard used for it. I don't know how many of you experienced miasms. I hadn't finished the sentence. In a layered way, when you have relationships, simultaneous occurring relationships between other aspects of yourself. So it's like when you have a multiple event occurring in your life. All I really want to remark on as an aside is that quite apart from the way that you work to resolve your miasms, and there are some techniques coming that I know will help you greatly with that, all I would suggest you do is to try and get accustomed to feeling the way the miasm begins to develop, because the miasm is a distinctly different feeling from photosonic intrusion. It's a different feeling to the way in which you will get an attempted field infiltration because something has found a portal in your living accommodation and it's coming through a mirror or a part of a wall, right? We've had some very interesting visitors in the house in Sarasota in last year. They've all got a different signature, right? Now, back in Hawaii, there was stuff provided to you about energy sensing. In angelic realities, there's stuff provided to you about energy sensing. This particular course, I don't think, has time for any of that. But I'm really just pointing out to you that you'll make your life a lot smoother, and your resolve to deliver the self-leadership that is required to maximize the opportunity that you're looking at. If you can make a note to yourself to spend a little bit of time considering the ways in which you need to be hygienically sound. In your maturity, or coming into maturity, you will pay attention to what I refer to as hygiene. And hygiene embraces your living experience, right? It's keeping you and your environment clean and as well as you possibly can. So, you pay attention to mirrors and aspects of your living accommodation. You will get accustomed to looking at it in different ways and feeling it in different ways, ensuring that the extended field around you is something that you're taking seriously in a different way. And you will ensure that your home really is your castle and not just some sort of place you go to have breakfast or an evening meal or meet your partner or whatever you do. If you're processing miasms alone, it can be a blessing and a curse. If you're processing miasms in a partnership with someone, you've really got to lay some rules down for yourself and for your partner. One of the reasons why people exist in partnerships viewed from a spiritual perspective and is so on inner earth is entirely dedicated to growth. As it is in inner earth, it would better be for us out here, because a tremendous service as well as a tremendous learning experience we can provide for each other if we recognize that the primary reason for being together is to grow. If you're a genuine twin, it will be to do with code exchange as well. But primarily, we're here to help each other grow. The family itself is here to help each other grow. When we use the word communion in inner earth, it means communion in community. It means a common shared understanding of our connectedness and our reason for being, our goals and ideals, without the need for discussion, without the need for disagreement. All right? That is reflected down to the couple level. All right? Now, there isn't a miasm occurring on the planet in a couple situation that concerns only one of them. The miasm always concerns both. They both have an involvement in the reason for its being there. They all have to do with the male-female relationship. They have to do with the sacrifices that the women folk made in those days to serve the cause that the men didn't understand too well and felt betrayed by. The men had to learn to forgive their women and understand them better than they do today. But there is also considerable and substantial forgiveness required from the ladies towards the gentlemen, and that is not recognized presently. The pairs will grow much more healthily, much more closer than they'd ever thought possible if they can look at each other with compassion and understand the suffering was joint and equal too, regardless who was run off with, regardless of who was castrated, regardless of who was tortured or drugged, set up, compromised, exposed, that the communities and societies that we all were part of leading one time have seen every conceivable heinous treatment that you could ever imagine, and then some. Okay? So the miasms are very, very male-female. They're very much joint, generated by the pair that are together at a given time. And sometimes pairs will come and go together in order to address some of those influences, because bear in mind, the miasms as compaction will also foster the stubbornness of shadow and the kind of behavior of the party. In other words, they will continue to accrete negative frequencies whilst ever they remain. And sometimes if people have got a lot of clearing to do, it's not a bad thing that people seem to have close associations with a number of people. You know, it's not because they're addicted to love or aspects of love at all, but really the deeper drive or the higher drive will be that they're actually recognizing on those levels that there are miasms to clear, and that by being of service to another without being conscious of it is a jolly good thing to do. And all I'm saying to you is to recognize each other when you go through the processes, try and sense they're coming much sooner. They always have a similar pattern. They will always involve people not hearing what the other one's saying. Always. And until you find your own ways of dealing with it together, you have to make allowances for that. And you may have to apologize for behavior that doesn't seem like you, because when you're having a miasm, it ain't sure as hell it isn't you. It's the being in the other place that's clearing it through you, but you agreed you would. All right? So you don't have to go into endless self-justification and say, that wasn't really me, because it was in a way, just one you didn't recognize. And all that stuff is just taking you back into victim-victimizer game. It's taking you back into feeling powerless, because the person you love isn't liking you right now, and you don't know what to say, because you didn't know what happened. Where'd that come from? Well, I know such a pig before. You know, but you're being a pig now. Right? But it wasn't me. And your partner says, well, sure looked like you. You know? And anyway, I was listening to you. No, you weren't. Yes, I was. No, you weren't. You want to fight? Yep. So you'll find this pattern will recur. It'll be perfectly formed. And as you form relationship with it and the signature that it carries, and you acknowledge it, and you talk with your friend and say, look, I am such a dumbass, I don't handle this well. And your friend may say, you know, I don't either. And you go, that little bit of love, that little bit of recognition, that little extra bit of union will come into you, right? And you feel stronger because of it. I'm just talking about the same blooming principle, don't you realize that? But I'm talking about it over here, about miasms. But I've been talking about it here, I've been talking about it there, I've been talking about it everywhere. What does it mean? It means there's bunches and bunches of power available to you. If only you'll decide to have a conscious relationship with whoever you're called. Just do it. It's really, really possible. It isn't very easy. It's not a lot of fun some of the times. But you can do it. Just say to yourself, I will. All right? I'll come to the mentor thing before I get to the end. I've got to get through the quiz yet, though. Boy, God, I talk more than that. Anyway, miasm. That's a detour around miasms. Now, photosonics. Right. How about wearing a diving suit? How's it? diving every day. You're getting the grids again, yeah, and biting your bum, you know, oh my God. All right. Now that one has a completely other pattern, right? It just really feels like you've got lead going through your veins, all right? You find that in your dream time, your higher parts will run a lot more Kundalini to try and compensate for what's running through the grids, right? To try and balance it out. So you'll notice that you get super stiff Kundalini pain around the base, and you'll sometimes find that your legs are like, you know, real solid wood. I mean, really awfully heavy. Very painful around the knees, around the ankles. Again, if you're fortunate enough to have a close friend or a partner, get in the habit of moving the frequency through. Right? Just actually give people just gentle foot rubs, calf rubs around the knees, and sometimes up in the thighs, right? Occasionally in the buttock, because there'll be a slight spasm if it's intense. And that as a problem will occur according to the grids that you're living over. If you find that photosonics are coming into your life and you're getting that really seriously heavy feeling in your body, like also it'll be like sucking energy too. You'll feel like you're really running really, really low on energy. And also if you get coupled with that, this sleep state Kundalini compensation coming up, which actually makes you feel much stiffer as well as heavier, right? One of the ways of reading that is you're living in a place that's completely unsuitable to your fields and move. You know, it doesn't matter whether you love the place to bits. It's bad place for you to be. Move. You know, your body is telling you, your fields are telling you, your relationship with the frequencies that are available are showing you that it's hurting you. Now, one of the things that the victim-victimizer issue does, that program, we're still talking to party and chaotic frequency, by the way. And one of the things it does, it generates all sorts of reasons for you to identify with things that are not really good for you. And if you could stand outside of yourself for 5 minutes and look back at the person that you see as yourself and the things that it's going through in order to maintain certain stuff, conveniences, appearances, space for working, convenience in terms of the friends, you know, you can make a list for yourself. You can make a stack this big. And not one of them's got anything to do with what's supporting you and where you're going. We all do it. You know, we do it with jobs. We hang on to a job that pisses us off so deeply, we wonder how we manage to go there every day. Why? Why? I mean, look, don't tell anybody else. Ashana and I have cleaned toilets to put food on the table. Get rid of the idea that you don't clean toilets. You'll clean toilets if that's what you have to do to make it work? I mean, who the hell are you to say you don't clean toilets anyway? We did. Why can't you? You see, this is getting towards the point of saying, I want you to feel free. And how are you going to feel free? How are you going to get in a place where you can express any of this power? How are you going to demonstrate to your friends in inner earth that you're actually capable of handling any? Without you get rid of all this garbage. Because that's what it is. It's a holographic loop that feeds your insecurity. It feeds your fear. It feeds your need to be at least level with the other guys. And if you're remotely articulate and you can understand some of the more difficult work, you can even get around to being superior to people. Good luck. This is not the direction you're heading in, guys. This is not what's needed. It's not what's required. And for goodness sake, I'm the last person to suggest that you shouldn't have fun. But not any price, really. Not really any price. I stop myself from going on then. All right. I'm getting into some of these ones. This we've covered. Paradigms as programs. I've already said I don't want to deal with any of the published material, but you ought to be seeing by now that we've talked about it enough times. You know, if it's not open your heart, it's, you know, don't get into judgment. Right? Do you think the Eiyani are judging you if they say, well, you haven't really got your head around handling power, and I'm not sure you're ready to come over here and start making stars and planets with us? Is that judgment? Well, a lot of people would call it judgment, wouldn't they? The way the belief systems that are sold by certain of the New Age movements, it certainly is. And we're not entitled to judge anybody or anything. Excuse me. Enough of that. Paradox. All the paradoxes spin around the victim-victimizer game. Try thinking about the idea of losing is winning. Think about the many, many times in which you engage in situations with people, and even with yourself, in which you have to have a certain outcome. Why? If it means looking after your life, if it means looking after your loved ones, okay. If you need to know it, anybody threatened Ashana and the kids that I represent, I'd pull the trigger on a gun, no question. And I wouldn't feel any guilt about it either. But outside of those kinds of things, extreme circumstances, it's just another part of the victimizer game running. Okay, so you can say, right, well, I don't treat people badly. You know, guys, I don't need to be in control much. I don't bully my girlfriend when she won't do what I want her to much. Then the women, bless them, who've come from a long way behind and have been through a lot for us, see their men struggling to express their love in ways they don't really know how to, and sometimes things don't work out too well, and by golly, you'll find some wonderful victims amongst them. And it has to be said, because the comments need to be balanced. You see the game played out over and over and over and over again. Okay? Now, if you can play a game with yourself or with a partner, and it's even more interesting if you have someone you can play with on a regular basis, try and actually think, I want to lose in this situation. I don't want to win. I want to lose. If a point of agreement arises over whatever it might be, and you're feeling each other, just flip the card that says, I will give this to this person. And just spend a week just doing it. And watch what happens. Because you know what will happen? You will meet a part of yourself you haven't met for a long time. That's the first thing that will happen. And the thing that will happen almost simultaneously is you will experience a part of the person that you've done that with that you've never met before either. Just by doing that. Now, that's being creative. And having no need to do anything but share what you have to share with another. And rather they had an expressed wish, even if it meant that you may have had a strong preference yourself, but you'd rather give them what they desire, you just wait and see what you can do with that. Because you'll bring more to yourself by doing that than you would by standing in a corner and saying, well, on this particular occasion, I have had my way for a few days now, I think I'll have all the chocolates tonight. Or candies, as you call them. Or any other variation of the same thing. It's just like magic. The losing is winning, winning is losing idea starts to release you from all the notions that you have of what you should have. And I'm not contradicting myself one jot when I say, yeah, and you will love yourself better for it. You will do a better job of loving yourself if you do that, when you appear paradoxically to act as if you didn't. Because you will liberate parts of yourself, as I said, that you've lost touch with a long time. And you will bring so much into your life and into the life of others. All right. A little bit on this, because I've touched on it a couple of times and not mentioned it. The leadership, to be explicit, is you leading your shadow. Remembering that your shadow is frightened, expresses his fear all the time, bit wild, and really needs to be assured that this thing called a soul or an oversoul or an avatar or a rishi loves it too, and that there will be room for it, that it will be included, that its extraordinary creative ability, when treated in a harmonious and loving way, does have some place in this plan that you have for yourself and it in the future. So an aspect of leadership beyond your own conscious relationship with yourself each day is to begin to be a leader of your shadow side. And we'll get the quiz in a minute, I hope, but I'm way over time. The partnership works in a similar way, But the partnership I want to bring your attention to, very briefly, is the partnership with Eiyani, the partnership with the aspect of yourself in the future. The Conttact course, if it's anything, is an invitation to develop the characteristics that would admit you to what we would consider to be a very privileged, very peaceful, very creative, incredibly wise and knowing civilization. And you are being offered an opportunity to become partners with that civilization, not just with your companion. You can't have a relationship with an individual that is a part of a civilization that exists according to the principles of telepathy, in which all that is known by everybody. There is no underdog, there's no overdog. There are specialists, sure, but everybody knows what everybody else knows, except that you're not focusing consciously on it at any given time. But if you want to know something, you just tap in to the collective conscious library, and you can have whatever you want, and you can spend days and weeks playing with any of it. Absolutely. We share willingly and lovingly all that we have available with each other. All you have to do is to observe the etiquette of being in communion with others who live for the principle of freedom and love and co-creative expansion on a free basis. Free means no force. And that is what you're being invited to do. And you can take it seriously. And to take it seriously means that you need to, without being too strong, take more responsibility for your self-management and the management of your conscious awareness on a daily basis. Because believe me, they do. What are they but consciousness functioning on what we would call a daily basis? But doing it with a full collective connection in operation all of the time. You can see how far away we are from readiness because we do not yet know communion between each other. We share an enthusiasm and sometimes a passionate interest for this work, but we have not yet reached a point that could even be called communion. We're not yet able to communicate with each other. The Aborigines have a very interesting way of explaining why the Western civilizations are no longer telepathic. It isn't the whole answer by any means. But the reason they give is because the Western people lie. Lying is contracting. Lying is fear-based. Lying is closed. Opposites of open. Opposites of loving. Right? Opposites of communion. Now, a requirement of restoring your telepathic ability is having nothing to hide. Nothing that is hidden can grow. Period. All right? If you want to get close to the Eiyani, and if you want to further your own cause to ascend, or much less reach at one-ment, do you think you have any relationship whatsoever with anything that contracts? And in 3D speak, that means fear, that means lying, it means all kinds of behaviors that keep parts of you closed. Now, I'm not suggesting that you walk around with your fields wide open. But you need to find safe places, and I'm coming back to the significance of partnerships again. All right? Partnerships were used as a form by the Nephilim to bring about certain kinds of circumstances that had to do with breeding. They changed the feminine cycle in order to have them, produce more progeny. The purpose of partnerships from our point of view is to create safe places in which people can begin to restore the necessary characteristics of telepathic communication between others. Eventually, I hope this group, and in not too many months from now, there will be signs that people are feeling secure enough amongst their brothers and sisters that they begin to experience telepathic communication between some of the members. It will be a sign that we're making progress. It will be a sign that we're on the right road. Okay? And part of the point I'm making is do look to each other, because really we are Eiyani. We're not different. And the best sign of all, to my mind, that we're getting there, we're getting to where we need to get to be, is when we can actually communicate with each other without words more often and more ably than we do. But what we crave is to be recognized almost. I'm not being impudent or unkind, but there is a craving for recognition. The GA speak to me. All right? Really, get rid of that kind of thing, guys. If there's anything going on, you just let it go, because it won't carry you very far. It's completely inconsistent with the kinds of characteristics, the kind of feel I'm trying to give you for what it means to become more involved with the Eiyani civilizations. All right? Because they will go with you up to a point. But you will not make the progress that you would hope to make if you continue to quietly feel superior, arrogant, privileged, or anything else. So, in this respect, what I've been telling you is that your conscious mind is capable of something called reasoning, and it is not yet capable of thinking in the sense of higher planes of existence. All right? The chaotic frequencies that operate through the apathy support a thing called a brain that is capable of reason, and that is all you're taught in school. You're taught to reason, not to think, by and large. All right? So that in talking to you in the way I have done, I'm talking to you about bringing more of your present awareness into your own personal, everyday conscious management in order that you can take control of your life to a great extent, you can address the shadow to a great extent, and with that you can relax and you can begin to feel more than you presently do. Because feeling more is a prerequisite to telepathic communication. If anybody here thinks that hearing voices in their head is what telepathy is, they're in for a bit of a shock. When you communicate with the being, in that way, they transfer frequency, which translates through the thing we call a brain into what we think are words, or sometimes, hearing words, or sometimes strips of words. But if you were to ask anyone in the audience, please describe an orange to me, you'd get probably, they're a fruit and it's a colour and a bit pimply on the outside, and sometimes when you open them, they squirt in your eye, and if you put them in the mouth, they're quite tasty, but they don't fill you up, and you have to have something else to eat soon after that, right? Something like that. If you ask an Eiyani, ask one of the companions sometime. Just ask them to show you, to tell you how they would describe an orange, or the nearest equivalent thing that they know to an orange. And they will transfer the collective experience. So say there are 600,000 people on inner Earth, right? They all have a connection and a relationship with orange that is personal to them but belongs to all of them. And when you ask for it, your companion will download the collective appreciation of an orange. All right? And, there's a risk of sounding saucy, but have you ever thought about making love with an orange? Because the richness of the feeling will just blow you out here, and you'll want to do something with the feeling, and it's like, I want to hug one, because they have that relationship with everything, right? You hear talk about the luminescence of color, right? You see some New Age pictures of mastery people and stuff, which are all done in like pastels. They're dead. They're like the dead blue in this damn sword that we're all thinking about, Yeah. But the color, as far as inner Earth's concerned, if you go to PAX, you see what I mean, because it's the only thing I've ever seen and Ash has ever seen that actually is there physically in front of you and you can look at it. The most amazing aquamarine turquoise that is electric. It's thick, but it's also luminescent. You can see right through it. It's absolutely extraordinary stuff. Anyway, right, quick one on the quiz then. The bottom line. All right. Your quiz results are looking for a situation. I'm jumping straight in past the questions because we looked at those. The progression is you identify, acknowledge, integrate, and express those aspects that we call shadow that, according to the scores, are a little more out of balance than you'd like them to be. And what's a little more out of balance than you'd like them to be looks like it's 15 or lower. This is not a bad thing. This is an opportunity. Right? I didn't say embrace the shadow earlier. I didn't say make it feel comfortable and welcome as far as the soul, oversoul, and the avatar is concerned. It just needs to be acknowledged. The quiz will help you to see where to look. And it has within itself a huge amount of potential for constructive and positive expression. That will arise when you use the techniques in conjunction with the kind of awareness that we're trying to get you to look at and include in the way that you think about things. Because when the techniques began to run and blow some of the crap out of the party, giving you opportunities for those to revert to their organic nature, you will find that you can derive positive expression from the shadow in conjunction with the technique. But having the conscious awareness of the opportunity means that as possibilities arise, and they will do it in a rather random way, because you can't say, okay, I want to blow a party units number 1, 2, and 3, and they belong with, dimension 1, da-da-da-da. You can't do it quite like that. You have to feel the opportunities to move through these parts of yourself that you've identified weaknesses in. I mean, hopefully for most people, not more than 1 or 2. I shouldn't think there'd be any more than that. Okay, now down here, you're talking about any low scores at this level, which is density 1, are indicating the strength of the boundary formed by the ego, okay, which is hyper-defensiveness of all the kind of victim-victimizer patterns, living attitudes, right, levels of awareness that are so deeply set in denial, right, that release is a very difficult and painful process. At this level, where you're looking at scores that are reflecting a movement up into the 20s, then here the new seeds of self, integration of soul, stability, developing some consistency in self-awareness and the self-management issue are beginning to come into play. When the score is rising up through the low 20s, approaching 24 and moving past it, what that's showing you is this thing about consistency, about self-awareness, self-management, and self-leadership. It means that whether you've been doing it intuitively or not, you've nevertheless been doing it, and it's showing you that you're making a progression. If you start to see in the third group of spheres here, which are those which associate with the oversoul, and if you see that one shifting up above the 22, 3, 4 level, right, it means that as a result of the attempts to acknowledge and not deny, to embrace and not reject things that we call the shadow, that you've actually popped some apart on your own, and that you've actually plugged in certain aspects of the higher self, and with that, of course, the flow of some primal life force current that you previously didn't have. If you get up to a place where you're beginning to run higher scores in the fourth group, then this speaks for itself. I mean, we've got takeoff. You're beginning to get a serious platform. And it's when you see the shift moving from left to right across the group of 12 spheres that I was pointing out, that when you see those scores beginning to gently rise across the page, all right, there might be an odd slight blip, a slight inconsistency. It's not to worry about. But you'll find that if you combine the techniques with some of the ideas I've been trying to see this evening, that you will really accelerate progress to the extent that if you do the test again in a couple of months' time, I swear that you'll be really surprised at how it shifted, and in ways that you probably wouldn't have thought possible. I'll just flash through examples real quick. Now, all right, what I want to say to people is that if anyone is troubled by a score in any of these areas, since it's personal, then clearly it'd be better to handle it on a one-on-one. And all I will say is that rather than drag you through what the characteristics of a righteous virgin are, or a professional victim is, or a terrorist versus diplomat at the manual level, or any of this business, if anyone is concerned about any one of these spheres being a very low score and doesn't know how to interpret the information that the handouts will help you read, because there's several pages of interpretive material to come to go with your quizzes. If you don't understand what this is talking about, and you sincerely and genuinely want to get a handle on an area that is scoring real low and that is bugging you, then I assure you that I will do my utmost to find the right kind of time to work with people like that on an individual basis, either by telephone or email, okay? So you will be given a copy of this. but it just characterizes some of the basic behaviors where these are all expressions to some degree of the victim-victimizer game, expressing at different levels of consciousness. Because bear in mind, the shadow is as alive up here, right, at D11, and the higher end of D11. Shadow is alive there, as you should by now realize, as much as it is down here. But some of the New Age teachings tend to imply that shadow only lives here, and it doesn't express all the way through. And of course it does. And these characteristics are all those associated with different forms of identity found, all right, at each of the levels. So the identities that could be characterized in dimensions 4, 5, and 6 have little labels. At the higher level, then we have sorcerer as opposed to wizard in the Manu. We have compulsive destroyer and obsessive projectionist down here. And then greater tyrant, sybarite satire, which is a really, the kind of dark avatar 11.5. And ultimately, the final expression at D12 is whether or not the characteristic is coming out as a liberator of all this, or coming out as a warden, a prison keeper person type. And that's the ultimate victimizer at the other end, and the ultimate opposite. Typical scores that people in different stages of life you'd see are like this. Okay. So, someone who's still asleep, all right, a total score running quite low, below 15, and one area that's trying to compensate for those, giving a bottom line of 52. And again, you see that there's some weakness in here, but the degree of strength coming from the soul level, a reasonable amount of support coming out of the oversoul level, and the avatar level is really just so blocked up here that it's not really expressing at all until these get cleared through. And that would be the kind of picture of someone who is still pretty asleep. If you got to what I'm calling here a beginning, where people are beginning to open, they're beginning to work with their awareness that they're more than just a body that goes to work every day from 9 to 5, then you start to see the scores are rising here. There's still some weaknesses around the soul level, some strength showing in this particular example at the oversoul level. That's not too strong, but the strength's reasonable there. That's not too strong, but the strength here as well. That's kind of typical of the sort of way you could see the dynamic. I'm not saying this is the only score. I'm saying this is kind of representative of the shift from here into here, where you see strength building at this level, where they're starting to move their awareness into one which is embracing the higher aspects of themselves, which is indicative of taking conscious control of the quality of the experience that you create for yourself and the awareness that nobody else creates it for you. When you move up beyond that, you just see the shift continue. So this is the point where you see a person who's fully integrated soul, where they're holding these aspects of shadow in balance. You see that the soul influence is really quite strong here. All right? You see both of these are in quite healthy condition, although there's a hint of some weakness remaining there. That's not so very strong. But already the shift into this area has already happened. That's a kind of confirmation. All right? And then if you just go down to the next level, you see the progression is continuing and how it does that. So here, this is showing a huge amount of improvement and balancing, utilization of the positive attributes associated with shadow here. The soul score is very positive. The oversoul is coming through quite very nicely. And the avatar self also. And if you read across the bottom, you see that gently rising progression I was talking about. It's there and it's here. Except that you can see it's not really carrying through to the avatar yet. But if you look down here, you see it going from 92 through to the low hundreds. All right? Now, that isn't top score. You know, if you were fully fitted out for your Eiyani involvements and more of your avatar self, you'd just be pulling, because you know. You see, you're sitting in the middle of a circle, you're aware of all the alternatives, right? in every question. You understand the extremes of every question. And you just blow the quiz to bits. I mean, you just hit it 40, 40, 40, 40, 40, 40, 40, because you understand completely. This is a way of showing you that is literal meaning. An avatar on probation. You're really getting your stuff together. But don't think that if you're scoring at this level, you got there, because you haven't. It means that you're getting real, real warm. You're getting the hang of what's required. No, I'm not doing that. I'm skipping the detailed attributes to get in here because I'm behind. Now, it gets really interesting in the way that we've moved this into a completely original place. Now, this is starting to take the same information, exactly the same stuff we've been looking at, okay? But what we're going to do now is we're going to talk energy language. All right? We're using the scores in a different way. We're not interested anymore in personas and personality traits and all that thing. What we're interested in now is to look to see what the fundamental balance relationships are between Ire, Mani, and Manu. Okay? Now, when you brought your quiz totals together, your groups of three spheres. The bottom left-hand one, numbers 1 and 4 and 7 and 11. And I can't count. Okay? Yeah, they're already written up here. 1, 4, 7, 10, 15 are all of the spheres that relate to Ire. Okay? 2, 5, 8, 11, and 14 are all of those that relate to Mane. And 3, 6, 9, 12, and 13 are all those that relate to Manu. Now, bear in mind that Manu is both beginning and end. Manu creates from within itself, creates Ire, Mane, which come back to Manu. All right? So fundamentally, we're most interested in a number of ways in what the Ire, Mane balance is. And what we're doing now is bringing the classical male-female right-left side of the brain into the field of energy and primal life force currents. So we're adding characteristics to Ire. So the spheres that are low, that are in the 1, 4, 7, 10, and 15, are low in Ire. So the divine feminine in those scores, the presence of the divine feminine, means there isn't enough if the score is below 15, or it means there's more than enough if there's 24 or higher in a sphere, numbered 1, 4, 7, 10, and 15. Okay, you follow that all right? And if you look to the other spheres, 2, 5, 8, 11, it will show you if your score is below 15, whether you're deficient in Mane, or the masculine aspect, the divine father aspect of primal life force currents. And similarly, if you look at 3, 6, 9, you'll see what the level of Manu is flowing through your fields in the moment that you completed the quiz. And I stress in the moment you completed the quiz, because the way you respond to questions will change, depending on the makeup of influences in your field at any given moment. But these will give you an indication of what the balances of primal life force currents are in your body and what to do about it if you see an area of deficiency. Now, if you want to play with it on a detail level, let's suppose and say that you've got a sphere that worries you because the score's real low, like 10. All right? I mean, it will happen sometimes, but it won't be that common. Now, there are a number of things that you do. First of all, the first thing that I would be telling a person to do is, if that were the case, and one of the very low spheres was Ire, I would tell them to spend much more time spinning the female part of their Merkaba during salutations than anything else. If it's a seriously low score, like a 9, 10, or 11, then you probably want to spend something like 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes spinning the Ire part of the Merkaba for every minute or two of spinning the masculine part of the Merkaba. And by doing that, that will pull in and develop the Ire that's being carried in the fields. And that will translate into balancing certain of the shadow aspects and influence that exist in what you call reality. So what you're starting to do now is to move into a place where you're using primal life force currents to address shadow through this kind of observation, where you're directing the frequency into aspects of your living experience to bring about correction and balance. And it's a direct complement to the techniques that Ashana's bringing through tonight. All right? Now, if you want to, you can actually figure the sphere correspondence from your notes, so you can match it back to the actual literal dimensional level. All right? You can create a frequency diet for yourself, so that if you're deficient, say in 1 and, just for the sake of argument, 2, you could actually say to yourself, okay, well, when I'm doing the dishes, I can just go chi prana, chi prana, chi prana, and actually top up that specific area of frequency that I'm deficient in as a result of the quiz. All right? Now, you can actually play with the associated ray colors if you just want to visualize the color while you're making the little mini song to yourself. All right? It's just a little diet. It's like having a meal. All right? You can maximize the intake of air by breathing in a particular way. You inhale more slowly and more deeply. You hold it briefly and exhale very fast, short, and sharp. That's how you actually breathe to pull air. All right? And then the characteristics that go with having too much ire, as an imbalance against mane and manu, will imply poor motivational work ethic, proneness to being victimized, and a tendency for manipulative, selfless behaviors. And that kind of relates back into the persona analysis and the categories that we use for it. The story on mane is the same. The color while you're making the little mini song to yourself. All right? It's just a little diet. It's like having a meal. All right? You can maximize the intake of air by breathing in a particular way. You inhale more slowly and more deeply. You hold it briefly and exhale very fast, short, and sharp. That's how you actually breathe to pull air. All right? And then the characteristics that go with having too much air, as an imbalance against mane and manu, will imply poor motivational work ethic, proneness to being victimized, and a tendency for manipulative, selfless behaviors. And that kind of relates back into the persona analysis and the categories that we use for it. The story on mane is the same principle at work, except that the difference, of course, are that you are dealing with the masculine side of it. It's indicative of... Well, yeah, I'm going up. Yeah, I was going to talk to you about this bit. I made a complete balls of it. Anyway, it's all right. So you would use the same principle over again. All right. So this time, if you were experiencing or observing deficiencies in mane, then you would work on the rotation, the salutation rotation of the male aspect for a longer period, 4 or 5 minutes to say a minute or 2 of the feminine aspect, and that will actually help you to build and balance and bring frequencies in that will directly have bearing on shadow release and shadow resolution. All right? Again, we have the specific tones that relate to the spheres in which you may be observing a weakness. So you can create a little song for yourself, like I illustrated just now, and just make a tune for yourself while you're doing the dishes or something, and that will kind of top you up. And in situations where you're feeling stressed or distressed, which are forcing parts of the shadow out, right? If you're being put under pressure, if somebody's picking on you, if somebody's being bad to you, whatever, and the corresponding component of the victimizer wants to come out to play with it, rather than, the breath that brings the Christos part of your personality into play, where you rise above it all, you see it for what it is, and you say, I don't play that game. I love losing. I can love losing, no problem. So it will help you just to breathe that way with your own personal diet, your frequency diet, your little song. If you were to actually to do that, to follow the breathing rhythm and to use just the 2 or 3 very short tones there, you'll find it will really rapidly come in and give you a sense of balance and collectedness, because it's a deficiency of the frequency that's making you feel vulnerable. And it means that the chaotic frequencies coming in from the apathy are completely overwhelming you, right? You're not coping on an energetic basis at all. So if you use these, you can really, really rapidly pull the balancing frequency into your field. Right. Yeah, in terms of Mano, we can't express it in quite the way we're dealing when we're dealing with persona, because Mano is a product of both Mane and Ire, right? When we get into that, there is something constructive to say, not the way that you asked the question, but the way that we found an answer to it, because this is like work in progress, but we've got something on it. Now, we're going in to talk about the summary of your self-test, and we're going to talk about these guys, right, which show you the full total representation, the balances between Mane, Manu, and Ire in your field. And how we get to figure that is just very quickly to do with the way that primal life force currents flow through the personal Cathara grid, where the Manu flows down through here, Mane down through the central vertical comet, Ire there. The black dots, incidentally, are the organic seals that connect the Cathara lines between them. And this will be in your pack. I mean, some of you have seen it before, but you can figure out that by working with Ire or Mane, when you've got deficiencies, will actually help you resolve some of these seals and open the Cathara lines, which also relate to what we call resolution of shadow, which actually means replacing chaotically oriented apartheid for positive oriented apartheid. Now, how we move into the final phase of the current version of the self-test. This is the primal Cathara grid drawn in a way that is just to illustrate the relationship with the personal Cathara grid. If you're looking at the echo maps, you would, those of you that are really into it will notice that the primal Cathara grid actually lies at this angle. It comes out here. All right? But this is just being used to illustrate, and it's an easy way of doing it. So what happens is that in order to understand the relationship and the antidote for certain frequency issues in the Cathara centers, it's like that's the 12-13 point is a pivot point, and you swing this all the way through 180 degrees until one lays over the other one. Okay? And that's where this comes from. All this is in your packet of information. All right. And this is just the preamble that's reminding you that the self-test scores are associated with the totals that appear in the hearts, okay? And that they show you the balances within the relationship between the elements of your soul group, all of yourselves, your 728, and the inherent bias towards or association with primal life force currents. Okay, and this is just about how you utilize it. Now, what you do is, if you have a need to supplement an area of deficiency, right, you work with its opposite. All right? And if you're deficient in Mane, then you use the tones associated with Ire and vice versa. All right? That's how you use this aspect of it. If you want to do healing work, then what you do is that you observe through the self-test which of the three, the Ire, Mane, or Manu, are your strongest one. And if you want to do healing in general, because there are some exceptions to this that have to do with sub-frequencies, but in general terms, there's a general rule that you can take and use. If you want to prepare and intensify the areas of strength that are represented by your entire family of incarnates and draw the healing qualities of them into your fields, you would do it taking the strongest frequency sphere. If that was Manu, you'd breathe the Manu. If it was Mane, you'd breathe the Mane. If it was Ire, you'd breathe the Mane. Right? And by doing that, you will build that presence with a healing focus in your field by really expanding the strongest aspects of self and bringing them in by using the breathing routine that are given on the previous page for the Ire, Mane, or Manu, whichever you're working with. But you simply look and see which is my strongest relationship with either of the three frequencies. And if you want to perform general healing work on others and yourself, you would breathe the frequency with which you had the strongest current association. All right? All right.
I'm a bit confused.
So am I. How can you help me?
Well, at first you said that if you are like lagging in one of it, say you're lagging in mayonnaise, then you spend more time spinning the mayonnaise. But but you're supposed to tone the E-ray instead, because the first time you said that whatever you're lacking, you spin more of that, and then you say that when you're using the tone, however, is whatever is lacking, you use the other one.
Opposite. It's opposite. That one.
Right.
Right.
I'll go back to this, because they're not the same. They're not really quite the same thing. What I was doing was saying that in the case of the E-ray, at this level, right? I mean, I'm skipping part of what I'm talking about, really, to try and get wrapped, because I should have been upstairs a half an hour ago. All right, I'm really saying that there are a combination of characteristics of E-ray in which, for example, since E-ray is sound sensitive, there are elements in the notes that would actually encourage you to think about working more with sound, whereas if you came in and read the notes on Manet, you'd realize that that is a visually oriented thing which has to do with symbols and codes, which you would create within this, right, a specific combination of all the elements that are listed here, right from working with sound, working with the appropriate mini-tones, right, that go with this condition. So this is very detailed. This is to do with the individual little spheres, all right? And these give you the combinations of how to say, okay, as I was saying earlier, I said that supposing you're deficient in D1 and D2, just for argument's sake, then you would actually combine these tones because of the sensitivity to sound, all right? You would regulate and work with the breathing in this way, and that would be directed to the little circles in the triangles, right? When I'm done with talking about that, I went to the last sheet with the hearts, and then switched in to talking about the areas of the strength in your field being either E-ray focused, Manet or Manu focused, and the way if you're going to approach healing either with yourself or with another in a general way, and you want to build the frequency in your field, you would build the area that all of the circles added together were showing you as the overall dominant presence of frequency in your field, because it's easier to pull it in. Okay? If in the overall sense, regardless of what the little circles were telling you about the areas of deficiency, in general terms, in the entire field that now relates to your 1,727 other selves, where you're performing a service to them as well as yourself in the here and now, and you move way beyond persona and personality issues into soul group thinking, all right, you'd work with the Ire Mani Mano in the way that I was describing. That was the last sheet. Does that answer your question okay? You think so? Well, I know you'll do me with the email anyway if you're still not clear, and that's fine, by the way. Yes.
Soul group. If you have two of those heart ones, are they heart ones? If they're close, like 1 point apart,
you work with them both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you assign a number to the high end? If it was too high, did you give it
No.
1 or above?
No.
Okay.
No, it's really, I mean, what we're doing is we're working on 2 basic levels. We're trying to allow the element of you could call it the old 4-body system, Jungian kinds of way of looking at the influences people experience as their reality and personality makeup. And we're trying to move the analysis into an area that directly relates to dimensionalization, the expression of the extended identities through space and time, the way that Manu Ire is also an explanation, your relationship with frequency is an explanation for what's going on in your own extended fields. And when you get into looking at miasmic stuff, when we hope to take the sub-frequency analysis to the next stage, then you'll be able to, we hope, begin to identify some of the attributes of the selves that are bleeding through in miasmic language and other ways like that. So it's like trying to create a multidimensional self-test, where the test will provide insights into the aspects of self, which are both supportive and are not. Those that are carrying shadow influences for you, outside of those that you acquired through your own childhood and upbringing. Because so the self-test begins in the traditional way, where it's looking at this life influence. But we're moving it, as you can see, into an area where we're trying to embrace it at its fullest, where we're trying to open it up so that we can get a read on the influences that are coming through the fields in the here and now. So trying to provide people with more insight, but most importantly, the means to actually to address energy as energy, and to resolve weaknesses and to utilize strengths in the appropriate ways by knowing what to concentrate on. All right? Is that okay?